Welcome in once again to Bucks Courtside Live. I'm Justin Garcia here with you as we get set for the Bucks and the Los Angeles Lakers today at Fiserv Forum. A matchup off the bat we'll start with not the showdown between Giannis and LeBron, as both of these players will be sitting out tonight's game. But you do have a big opportunity to bounce back now if you were the Bucks and pick up a victory after Sunday's loss to the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll hear from Coach Mike Budenholzer in about 15 minutes from now. Also be joined by Matt Velasquez of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and a touch on a piece he just wrote on Giannis, his takeaways from that 76ers game as well. And really things to look for here as this team continues their push towards the postseason now. Saw another team clinch a postseason berth last night. The Sixers did, of course, over the weekend as well. So more and more teams starting to punch their ticket to the playoffs, and this is now becoming more of just jockeying for position now for these teams. One of the things we have touched on, though, really after Sunday's game and a few other times is what we're starting to see now are teams kind of settling into where you think they'll be in terms of seeding in the postseason. Warriors got a win last night, so they are just 2.5 games back of the Bucks. But again, with that tiebreaker and 3 games up in the loss column, it's really more than that. And for Warriors, I said for the Raptors got a win. For the Raptors, with 11 games remaining, 12 games remaining for the Bucks, we're talking about 3+ games now that the Bucks have that cushion. That's really a lot to overcome in that limited amount of time. So you start to get the feeling 1 and 2 and exactly how it is, Bucks and Raptors in the East. The Sixers, with that win on Sunday, another loss by the Indiana Pacers, who have a brutal schedule that they're in the midst of right now. Starting to get the feeling the Philadelphia 76ers are going to settle into that 3 spot, meaning the 4-5 matchup would be the Pacers and the Celtics, and those teams continuing to fight it out for who has home court advantage in that series. The Pacers right now a game in front of the Celtics for the 4 seed, meaning they would host games 1 and 2 in that 7-game series. 6 right now is the Detroit Pistons. I know we're not playing the Pistons tonight, but it is worth pointing out what the Pistons have really done now for the last couple weeks. 7-3 in their last 10 games, up to 36-34. This is a team, go back a couple of weeks ago, they were on the outside looking in for the postseason, and now they are comfortably in that 6th spot. Game advantage over the Brooklyn Nets, though I do believe they own the tiebreaker over Brooklyn, and a lot of this has to do with the play of a forward Blake Griffin and what he has done to really carry that team these past few weeks. But 6 right now, the Pistons. Brooklyn Nets, your 7 seed. They're a game in front of the Heat, who are still holding down the 8 seed, and the Heat now starting to get some separation as well. They're a game and a half in front of the Magic, 2.5 in front of the Charlotte Hornets, and at this point, 4.5 out. I think you can pretty much call it for the Washington Wizards. 4.5 games back of the Heat for that 8 spot with just 11 games remaining. So it's looking more and more like that 8 seed is either going to be the Heat, Magic, or Hornets, and in all likelihood either the Heat or the Magic, with the Pistons and the Nets at the 6 and 7. If the playoffs started today, it would be the Bucks hosting the Heat. Raptors would have the Nets. Pistons and Sixers, an intriguing matchup there, would be your 3-6. And as we touched on as well, Pacers and the Boston Celtics would be the 4-5. You saw the Golden State Warriors lose again last night. Nuggets won, so the Denver Nuggets and Warriors are tied for the top seed in the Western Conference. This is important in the sense that the Bucks now adding more and more distance between themselves and the Western Conference teams there as well at 52-18, 4.5 games in front of the Golden State Warriors for the best record in basketball. In terms of you reach the finals, who would have home court advantage there? And of course, the Bucks swept the season series, same margin, but swept the season series with the Denver Nuggets as well. Point of it is this: we are getting closer and closer to the playoffs. We're getting close now to only 10 games remaining in the regular season, that we're starting to get to the point where we're settling into who you'll see in terms of matchups and potential matchups in the postseason for the Bucks. Getting a look at Chris Middleton right now. Let's go back to Sunday afternoon's game. There's been a lot of takeaways and a lot of narratives put out there after that loss to the 76ers, But I think the biggest takeaway is this. That was a very big and important game for the Philadelphia 76ers. You look at the record that they had against teams in the Eastern Conference, against those top four seeds outside of themselves. This is something we've mentioned a couple of times already here on these shows, but the job that the Bucks have done playing against those teams in the East, before that game against the Sixers, they were 9-3 against the other four teams, the Raptors, Sixers, Pacers, and Celtics. 9-3 against those teams. They're now 9-4. 3-1 against the Raptors and winning that season series. 3-1 against the Pacers, taking that season series. 2-1 against the Celtics, also taking that season series. And now they're 1-1 against the Sixers. One game remains. It's in a couple of weeks from a Thursday, April 4th in Philadelphia. So that game would not only give you a win against the Sixers, it would give you the season series against Philadelphia. It would improve the Bucks to 10-4 against the other four teams in the Eastern Conference, and it would mean the Bucks will have won on the road against all 7 potential playoff teams in the Eastern Conference. But the Bucks 9-4 now against those teams. Sixers now 5-8, 1-1 against the Bucks, 3-1 against the Pacers, on the verge of being swept by the Celtics, and a 1-3 against the Raptors. They have a game left with the Celtics and a game left with the Bucks. But again, 5-8 against those other teams are the 76ers. And the Celtics still 7-5. They have a game with the Sixers, 2 left with the Pacers. Raptors the only team of those 4 that are already done with those teams, though they just went 8-7, and the Pacers 4-9, 2 games left against the Boston Celtics. So the Pacers certainly with some tough luck against those teams. But that's how it shakes out against the other 4 teams in those top 5 spots in the Eastern Conference. That's why we say that was a big game for the Sixers, not only because of some of those struggles they had against those teams earlier this season, but it was a big opportunity for them to make a statement and pick up a win against the top team, not only in the Eastern Conference, but in all of basketball, and really a chance for that new starting 5 to really showcase themselves. And that starting 5 was fantastic in that game. But this was a game that you knew coming in the Sixers had circled on the calendar. And we have reached the point with the Bucks where you talk about what it's been like in seasons past for teams like the Houston Rockets, like the Golden State Warriors, and the Toronto Raptors, where you are the hunted. Teams are coming into your building or road games against you. You are the team that those teams are chasing. That's what we've seen, and that's what we've reached so far this season with this Bucks team, and I think that was certainly the case Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers. The other thing is this. 5-point loss. The defense gave up 130 points. But if you examine that defensive performance, there's a couple of key takeaways. 76ers were on fire for most of that game. Now, I know overall they ended up shooting 47% from both the field and from three-point range. But look at how they started the game for Philadelphia and how they heated up, especially in that second quarter where they reached better than 50%. Fourth quarter especially, both teams were on fire. 43-41, the scoring for both teams. But as tough as it is to say, the Bucks did a very good job defensively against the Sixers in that game. The Sixers, as we mentioned, hit a lot of tough shots, and a lot of that has to do with the performance you saw in the fourth quarter from the duo of Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler. That duo for Philadelphia combined for 32 of the Sixers' 41 points. But what the Bucks did and why you look at a matchup with the Sixers potentially in the postseason and still see a lot of advantages for the Bucks, what they did was what they have done all season long, and that's really crowd the paint. They limited the Sixers' number of shots at the rim. I believe it was 11 to 20, somewhere in that range that the Sixers were. And anytime you can hold a team to 50% or lower of their shots closest to the basket, that tells you the type of defensive performance they did. And that's a big reason why. Granted, he hit a lot of them, but that's a big reason why you saw Joel Embiid painting it out there on the perimeter, taking 13 three-pointers in that game because the Bucks defense did such a good job of walling off the paint and making sure there weren't easy looks in the perimeter. So the defense of the Bucks, I thought, despite the 130 points that they gave up, if you just look at that, I thought it was a good defensive performance for that team, all things considered. And, we touched on that fourth quarter and how both teams really seemed to catch fire in that fourth quarter. We mentioned 43-41, the scoring for both of those teams. 14 in the fourth for Jimmy Butler, who hit maybe the biggest shots of the game on a couple of consecutive possessions. Joel Embiid had 18, including 3 of his three-pointers in that game came in the fourth quarter. But let's also mention the job that Giannis, obviously, and Chris Middleton did in that fourth quarter as well, as that duo combined for 28 of the Bucks' 43 points. And in the case of Middleton, 4 of 5 from the field that he was shooting in that fourth quarter. So a big performance there when it counted the most in that fourth quarter for Chris Middleton. But it just ties into 76ers played very well. Bucks defense, I thought, was very well, played very well, I should say, as well. And they did a good job of taking away the easy baskets, which they have done all season long. Sixers just hit some tough shots. But for all these things we pointed out, for the way the Sixers shot the ball earlier, the way they started the game, the three-pointers from Joel Embiid, it's also worth pointing out, too, what the Bucks starters outside of Giannis did. And I know we touched on what Chris Middleton did there in the fourth quarter, but Nico Mirotic, 1 of 7 with just 2 points. 4 of 11 from Brook Lopez with 14 points. 5 of 14 from Eric Bledsoe. It was a night where the rest of the starting 5 didn't have their best game, and you heard Coach Budenholzer say so as well after the game. He didn't think his team played particularly well, and despite all of that, it was still a ball game down the stretch, and the Bucks only lose by 5 points. So I think all things considered, that's really the biggest takeaway to take from that game against the 76ers on Sunday afternoon, that the Bucks didn't play well, but as we've seen really throughout this season countless times, despite not having a good game, this team is still in the mix of things. A lot of that has to do with number 34. We didn't even touch on 52 points from Giannis, a new career high in that game, and really the job that he did in that second half where you could tell he was in takeover mode, but 52 points from Giannis in the game, 17 points at halftime that he had. So 35 in the second half for Giannis, 17 in the third, 18 in the fourth, and he scored 52 points on 26 shots, which is just beyond remarkable and incredibly efficient. So the takeaways for me are that it was a big game for the 76ers, not to say it's not a big game for the Bucks, but it was a much bigger game for the 76ers, and despite all the struggles and the things that did not go their way, the Bucks were still right in that game up until the end and made another run in the fourth quarter, ultimately losing by 5 points to the Sixers. If you want to interact with us, you can join us on Twitter, on Facebook as well, and leave your questions or comments there. Again, we'll hear from Coach Mike Budenholzer momentarily here. Also, Matt Velasquez of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel will join us. We mentioned the story that he just put out there on Giannis. And another thing worth monitoring for tonight's game is the starting 5. Now, we kind of questioned before the game on Sunday what type of look would we see Coach Budenholzer go with here. Would it be seeing the Bucks go big? And do you move Nikola Mirotic into the starting lineup, push Chris Middleton into the backcourt? That's what we saw happen. And you heard him asked about it before this game, too, when he revealed this would be his starting 5. This game is in Sunday against the Sixers. When he revealed that's the starting 5, you heard him asked, this is something you'll stick with. Wouldn't give an answer one way or another, but did say, look, if you followed me in my coaching career, I tend to like to stick to things once I find something. So that would seem to indicate this is something they've thought about, and a decent chance we will see that same starting 5 tonight with Chris Middleton alongside Eric Bledsoe in the backcourt and Nikola Mirotic as really your other forward up there in the starting 5 along with Giannis and, of course, joining Brook Lopez there for the Bucks. But that's certainly one thing to keep an eye on as the Bucks continue to look to find ways here to get by with no Malcolm Brogdon out indefinitely with that injury now that was revealed over the weekend. A couple of comments on Facebook pertaining to that. Gary saying, Brogdon out, we need George Hill to step up, Tony Snell as well, and Chris Middleton as well. George Hill, that's the other thing is, this injury to Malcolm Brogdon, at least thankfully, is coming at a time when this Bucks team is starting to get more healthy. Now, certainly the one guy that you're not really sure about is Dante DiVincenzo that you heard again on Sunday afternoon Coach Budenholzer saying they were kind of taking a cautious approach with him once again. But we saw George Hill return. George Hill, they're still kind of working back into the mix, although he indicated on Sunday, did Coach Bud, that he's getting closer and closer to being 100% and ready to really take the reins off there. But George Hill is working his way back in. Sterling Brown is getting closer and closer to a return. You do have Pat Connaughton and what he has done for this team in his spurts so far this season. So you're starting to at least, once again, build up that depth that you've had most of this season in the backcourt. And you have it in the front court as well. As, you know, the other thing it does is moving Nico into the starting lineup now. Saw it on Sunday. This opens up more minutes for DJ Wilson, which, you know, what we have seen really in these last 2 games, let's go back to, but this whole season, what we have seen is every time the Bucks present DJ Wilson with an opportunity, he makes the most of it. And you saw that again against the 76ers on Sunday, 13 points, knocked down 3 3-pointers, 11 of those 13 coming in the first half. But more than that, you can point to the 13 points because that's the easiest to take note of. But it's the defense that DJ Wilson provides this team with, his ability to switch and defend guys out there on the perimeter, down in the low post as well. That is really what's been most valuable to this team in the minutes that DJ Wilson has picked up this season. So the encouraging thing, the silver lining, is that this opens up more time for DJ Wilson, who has done nothing but thrive in the opportunities that he has been given. And certainly you would anticipate even more of an opportunity tonight for DJ Wilson with no Giannis as well. So DJ Wilson, the way he's playing, Ersan Ilyasova, after we saw, I guess, what you would consider struggles midway through the season, but starting to round back into the form that we've seen. And really, once you hit the playoffs, you know what to expect from Ersan Ilyasova. So the depth is there. What we have mentioned all season long, the depth and trying to find minutes and playing time for these guys, whether it be Pat Connaughton, who's out there working on it now, whether it be Pat Connaughton or Dante DiVincenzo, who was a big part of this rotation early in the season, DJ Wilson as well. All these guys that the Bucks have tried to find minutes for, we have cautioned depth is a good thing to have, and eventually there's going to come a time when all of these guys are going to get their opportunity, not necessarily at the same time or together, but the opportunities will present itself. It's what you do with it once it's there. And guys like DJ Wilson, Pat Connaughton as well, have certainly made the most of it this season. Before we get any further, though, let's head downstairs and hear from Coach Mike Budenholzer.
The process behind him not playing today.
You know, yesterday was an off day, but, you know, a lot of guys still come in on off days and just get treatment. So I think, you know, he got some treatment. And then, you know, just we'll see how he feels today coming in. And just coming in today, it's, you know, he's in a place where it's not good to play, can't play. So mostly, you know, Troy and Laura and the medical group. And so, yeah.
But who are you going to start in place of Giannis?
Still to be determined, I think. Yeah, so we're not 100% sure.
I think since the last time we saw you, Tim Frazier joined the team, and you've talked a little bit about the lack of guards that you've had at times. So what does it mean to have a guy who was here during training camp kind of come back and already know the system and be rejoining you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think we feel really, really fortunate that Tim, you know, was somebody that we could add to the team. It was, you know, I guess every coach probably says the same thing. It's really hard cut. I thought he was great for us in the preseason, you know, great player, and the human being's just off the charts. And so I think the fact that he knows kind of everything we're doing defensively, offensively, is going to allow him to, you know, he's probably going to play tonight. And I just think the character and the competitiveness of him, he just fits us great. So, you know, very excited to welcome him back. I will, you know, just say, you know, Christian did a great job for us. And just like it wasn't easy, you know, with Tim, it's even harder with Christian. So, you know, best to him going forward. I'm very appreciative of all he did for us and the progress he made, the player he's becoming. He's got a bright future.
When you look at, you know, obviously Tim comes in, he was here in camp. How much of the stuff that you guys worked on in camp can he just retain and immediately slide in to be able to use?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I think sometimes Tim probably hasn't been in the league as long as I think he's been in the league. But, I think of him as being one of those veteran guys, high IQ, like just focus and locked in and attention to detail. So I think, he's gone and played at New Orleans and been other places. But I think, there's always that where he can recall it. And I think he's such just the kind of the true point guard that, thinks the game and thinks about where shots are coming from everybody. So, I think he'll be able to figure, and, things change. So, he's got to figure out a few of the things that are new or different. So, but I think it's really, really valuable that he was with us for all of training camp.
I guess while we're talking about guys that are maybe coming back or being a little bit injured, Sterling was taking part in some 5-on-5 today. I know you mentioned last week that you stopped him from shooting for a little bit. So is he, how close, I guess, is he to coming back?
Yeah, I think he's getting very close. I think we're hopeful the end of the week that he'll be cleared to, play and be available for games. So today, I'm pretty sure it was the first time 5-on-5. So, I think it's always that, let's see how he reacts, see how he feels coming out of today. But, hopeful that he'll be available the end of the week.
We spoke a lot about what you'll miss most, I guess, with Malcolm being out for so long. You had 53-point attempts. That was the most you've had in a long time the other day against Philly. Do you think that is related in any way to Brogdon and the way he attacks the paint and sort of you guys trying to figure out how to play without him, or how did you sort of assess that?
Maybe a small factor. I think that, Nico played more. He was obviously a great 3-point shooter, and kind of that's one of his strengths. Started him, and I think, Giannis was doing a great job of attacking the paint, and then just kind of surrounding him with shooting, and so I don't, like I said, I think just maybe a small part of it.
But how important has Brook Lopez been to this year for you, and also just the value that you have him at?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify or articulate how valuable Brook has been to us, but I think you look at the numbers, it's off the charts. I would say the interactions, the way his teammates. You just feel how much his teammates trust him and how much they know that he's there and kind of literally and figuratively got their back. I think they're, especially he and Eric Bledsoe developed like this really unique defensive kind of chemistry. And, the space he creates for us offensively is just, there's so many things he does for us. And, I don't get too much into the contracts and stuff like that, but obviously to have him, on the contract we do is just. But I think Brook is very happy. I think he's really enjoying it. I think he just feels like he's in a great place, and it's been, I think great for both of us.
Bud, I mean, the playoffs are just around the corner. This is a time where a lot of teams are looking to get guys rest and looking for those opportunities. What's it like, kind of? Being down so close to the playoffs and all that starting, and kind of keeping guys engaged on the games at present, finishing out the regular season.
Yeah, no, there's sometimes a challenge, but I think most teams that understand you want to be playing well going into the playoffs, you want to be sharp, you want to be in a good rhythm and things like that, that you need to keep a focus, you need to keep an urgency. And I'm not saying we've been great. I think we can be better going, down these last 10, 12 games, whatever it is. And I think the guys understand that. And sometimes we're going to have a dud, but, I think hopefully we can have urgency and really have a focus where we want to get better and be play well going into the playoffs.
Coach, just wonder what's on top of the scouting report with LeBron not playing as you look at the Lakers.
Well, our scouting report was done before he announced, so our assistant coaches are a little frustrated. They could have announced it a little bit earlier, and then the report would have been. So he's such a big part of any team he's been a part of. So but there's a lot of guys that are going to welcome the opportunity to step up, and Rondo's such a great orchestrator and point guard, and can really control a game, and how do you defend him and try and make it a little difficult on him and the shooters, and Kuzma can get going, and KCP can get going, and Bullock and all those guys. So, I think especially with a guy like Rondo, who can, pull a group together, who can kind of, orchestrate the game, we need to be prepared and be ready.
Coach, I know you spent a lot of time with Greg Popovich earlier in your career, and I think yesterday he locked up 22 straight years of winning seasons, which is just absurd to me. What do you think the main reason is he's been able to do that?
Well, he would always say he's had great players, the Tim Duncan line, the Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. He always deflects and always gives the credit to the players, which I think goes without saying how important it is that he's had a great group of players. But I think the discipline that he instills in his teams, both defensively and offensively, the understanding of the group is greater than any individual, and how they play together on both ends of the court and sacrifice for each other. And they're just, God, you could just go down the lines. They're always great defensively, a real priority, a real time and attention to detail defensively. An understanding of players and development and developing young players. And he's just a special coach. He's a great coach. So there's a reason he's a big part of those 22 straight. Great. Thank you.
It's Bucks coach Mike Budenholzer with his thoughts on today's game against the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, a game where we will not see Giannis or LeBron James. So that's the bummer of it here. But we will see DJ Wilson, who's getting a shot in right now, and you'll see Lance Stevenson. You see getting some shots up for the Lakers. DJ Wilson, though, and Cortez saying DJ's here. DJ Wilson, though, we touched on what he did in that game against the Sixers and what he's done all season long. Again, a credit to him and what he has been able to do, the impact that he gave this team starting back in December. And it's really no coincidence that when the Bucks defense started to take off after that game against the Knicks on December 1st, from December 2nd onward, that defense started to take off. And two things that really happened around that stretch were the emergence of DJ Wilson and the arrival of George Hill, really helping turn this defense around. And, the last 10 or so days, I know we've touched on some of the defensive issues that this team has had, minor issues, and you heard Coach Budenholzer address it as well, saying it's just he views it as just a blip on the radar. But that's another thing you point to, where that is when DJ Wilson had fallen out of the rotation because of the arrival of Nikola Mirotic. And it's also when you didn't have George Hill due to that injury. So we're seeing George Hill get more and more up to speed and back into game shape here. And you've seen the opportunity present itself once again for DJ Wilson. What he did against the Sixers, and really what's big is what DJ Wilson has given this team all season long has been on the defensive end of the floor. And you heard the question brought up about Christian Wood. So the Bucks brought back Tim Frazier, and that was another thing brought up to Coach Bud. Speaking of Tim Frazier, felt they were lucky to get him back. It was a tough cut in the preseason. And go back to that decision-making process where you had a handful of guys up for that final roster spot, ultimately going to Christian Wood. But there was some belief at the time Tim Frazier might win that final spot. So that speaks to Coach Budenholzer saying this was a tough move at the end of training camp in the preseason. And we feel very fortunate to be able to get him back here. He played nearly 50 games with the Pelicans, who picked him up after Elfrid Payton went down with the injury. And Elfrid Payton, not to get too sidetracked here, Elfrid Payton, by the way, what he has done recently, 5 straight triple-doubles. The company he has joined there, players like Michael Jordan and Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain, so joining some elite company in doing that. But one of the big benefits here to bring back Tim Frazier at this point in the season, Tim Frazier, as you heard Coach say, knows their offense and defense. That makes it a very quick study here, and he said you will likely see him tonight. Knowing the offense and defense certainly helps that out. But one of the other things he mentioned, and we hear Coach Budenholzer mention this with a lot of guys on this team, basically every player on this team, DJ Wilson's another guy we've heard this said of, high IQ basketball player. That is what Tim Frazier brings to this team. So you're going to need to have to really find a way to just get by here for the final 12 regular season games and into likely the first round of the postseason with no Malcolm Brogdon out indefinitely. And Tim Frazier is a guy that certainly helps the Bucks do that. But the defense we pointed to of DJ Wilson, that's the big thing. And that's what DJ Wilson has always brought to this team. Now, Sunday you saw a lot more of the offense. Knocked down 3 3-pointers, finished with 13 points. And that's the one thing you continue to say. If you want to see more from DJ Wilson, it's that. Maybe get a little more aggressive offensively and get some of the shots up that we saw him really do at Michigan. Coming into his NBA career, we thought DJ Wilson was just going to be a stretch four that just hung out in the corners and took three-pointers. And what we've seen along the way, and a lot of this is a credit to this coaching staff here by Coach Budenholzer, but what we've seen is the work they've done with him to turn him into a player where Coach Bud said coming in, they felt he had a high basketball IQ. What he does, the way he gives you the switching ability defensively, the way he can extend plays, and his playmaking. Now, Coach Bud has put it as non-conventional playmaking, but still, all of these things that DJ Wilson have brought have been outside of scoring the basketball. And that was the one thing that I think was holding Christian Wood back, was that, as we've touched on numerous times here on this program, what you're looking for from your second unit when you're a team like the Bucks is not necessarily offense. That's why if you just look at bench scoring, it can be a deceiving stat, because most of the time, the teams that have the highest scoring bench in the league are oftentimes teams that are closer to the bottom of the standings. You're a team like the Bucks, and you have the starting five they have. A team like the 76ers as well, where you have five guys that are capable of giving you 20 points or more on a nightly basis. You're not looking for offense from your bench. You're looking for your bench to simply hang on to that lead or, basically help pull you back into the game. So that's what the Bucks had been looking for in that second unit, and everything that Coach Budenholzer told us they were looking for here in the minutes that would have gone to Christian Wood is what DJ Wilson has done. Rebounding, playmaking, defense, as he often put it, looking for ways to make an impact without scoring the basketball. That's what DJ Wilson has done all season long. So there were a couple of things against Christian Wood. DJ Wilson is in front of him in the pecking order, and he's already doing that. But when we mention the pecking order as well, DJ Wilson's there. You bring in Pau Gasol. Brook Lopez, obviously, and Giannis we know about. But you have Ersan in the mix already. You bring in Nikola Mirotic. There's a lot of depth in the front line here of this team. So it was going to be tough for Christian Wood to crack the rotation no matter what he was doing in the G League, which, again, hats off to him for the performances you saw with the Wisconsin Herd. The 40-20 game that he had, basically averaging 30 and 10 in the G League this season. Certainly a talented player that you believe will get his chance somewhere, but it was just a numbers game here for the Bucks, especially in that front line. And I think they held on as long as they could, but this injury to Malcolm Brogdon really forced their hand that they needed some more backcourt depth, especially as you heard Sterling Brown, we heard last week, wasn't shooting the basketball. He is going through more of that now, but you heard Coach Bud say he's getting close, and they think it'll probably be the end of the week. So sounding like either Friday or Sunday that you would see the return of Sterling Brown, but especially with a banged-up Sterling Brown who isn't back yet and working his way back in. George Hill, who is, I think, not 100%, but still working his way back in. Dante DiVincenzo, we're not sure of when you can get him back out there after, missing a couple of months and then coming back. And now Dante DiVincenzo working through some more of that bursitis in his heel. So it just reached the point where you did need to address the depth in the backcourt and add some insurance. And really the best possible option out there was Tim Frazier, who, again, spent some time with his team in the preseason, really understands the offense and defense here of this team. And as you heard Coach say, high IQ basketball player that they felt very fortunate was still out there. And not only that, released by the Pelicans on February 28th, was not on a roster on March 1st. So he is eligible for the postseason. So you have that as well, which is big as you really still try to get through here this injury to Malcolm Brogdon. So we mentioned, feel free to interact with us on both Facebook and Twitter. We'll get to your comments and questions here. And that what you're watching, or we're watching now, the outside shooting to DJ Wilson, that's what's big. And here's a look once again at Tim Frazier, who makes his return. Tim Frazier, Pat Connaughton on the screen as well. But Tim Frazier, as Coach Bud said, we will see him, or likely will see him tonight, making his return for the Bucks. Should give this team a big boost because, oftentimes with the Malcolm Brogdon absence, what we'll point to is a couple of things. Number one, and this was asked after the game, and you heard it asked just moments ago, we saw the Bucks take a lot of three-pointers against the 76ers. And I know the whole mentality of this team, to let it fly, three-point shooting is encouraged for this team. And you heard Coach say that after the game as well. You don't want to try to get guys to take the ball to the basket when the system encourages three-point shooting. Still does dunks, layups, and threes are what you're looking for. But you don't want to dissuade guys from taking that three. But that's what Malcolm Brogdon did so much of. We talk about Giannis and getting those shots at the rim, points in the paint, the dunks, everything that he brings to this team. Certainly big. But Malcolm Brogdon, probably their second best finisher at the rim, and his ability to get into the lane, get to the basket, and get those shots off, really big for this team, especially as you surround the perimeter with shooters and have guys like Malcolm, even Eric Bledsoe put him in there as well, guys that can really do it all, that can get to the basket or can shoot it from the outside. So no Malcolm Brogdon the first time out there. It results in 53 pointers taken by the Bucks. You heard Coach say just a couple of moments ago, wouldn't necessarily say the uptick in three-pointers was because there was no Malcolm Brogdon, but that's really something to keep an eye on here is what Malcolm brought to that offense, the ability to penetrate, get to the basket, finish at the rim. You almost have to find somebody else, not replicate that, but do some of it. And the other big thing was we saw Malcolm Brogdon play a lot of minutes with the second unit as well due to the substitution patterns. It would often be Malcolm Brogdon or Giannis that were getting a lot of minutes with that second unit. And looking at the bench and their performance against the 76ers, didn't have the best performance and really a slow start that we saw the second unit get off to in that game. 13 from DJ Wilson, but the rest of them, Tony Snell, held scoreless. 5 points from Ersan, 2 points from George Hill, who played just 10 minutes, and 6 points from Pat Connaughton in his 24 minutes. So just as we have said, a lot of the second unit, George Hill, what he has brought to that team, both defensively and with the communication, has been big. I think the absence of Malcolm Brogdon speaks to that as well, and not having Malcolm Brogdon with that second unit, I think, stood out for this bench. But, again, tonight's a different game and a chance to move forward here. A win tonight, 53 on the season it would give you, and that would be your most since 1986 when this team went 57 and 25. So a chance to move past what you did in the 2000-2001 season when this team went 52 and 30 and finished one game short of the NBA Finals. Cammie chiming in here, a Chris Middleton fan. Good to hear from. Certainly, couple of questions already chiming in here for Giannis. No, Giannis will not play tonight. No Giannis, no LeBron James in this game either. Gary asking, do the Bucks start Nikola Mirotic or start George Hill? Maybe they should keep Chris Middleton in his original position and bring George Hill into the starting lineup as he's a natural point guard. Look for more scoring from Bledsoe. George Hill isn't going to move just because of what we just outlined there and the comfort that Coach Budenholzer has with him, what he brings to that second unit as really the all-around leader in terms of communication, his ability to really run that offense, but defensively too, because, as we just ran through, when you look at the second unit and what you're looking for that defense and basically protect the lead or help us come back from a deficit. You're looking for defense and a defensive spark from that team. That's what George Hill has brought to this team. And looking at most of these guys on that second unit, you look at their individual defensive ratings. Guys like DJ Wilson, guys like George Hill, both below 100. Sterling Brown, we saw that defensive rating coming down. He's near 100. So the defense that they have really built up here with that second unit, I think, has been vital, and George Hill has played as big of a role as anyone in that. So I think you'll probably see going forward what we saw on Sunday, and, Coach said himself, once he finds something, he really likes to stick with it and doesn't like to go back and forth and make a lot of changes in that starting lineup. So leads you to believe we'll see Nikola Mirotic in the starting five once again as for tonight. Sounds like a good chance it's going to be Tony Snell getting the start in place of Giannis with no Giannis and no LeBron in this game. The shame of that is, man joining us now, just put a story out there the other day on the connections between Giannis and LeBron, which I wanted to start off by asking you about. But some of those lines from Giannis, Matt Velasquez of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel joining us, some of those lines you got from Giannis about just where he was and when LeBron really came into his prime, where Giannis was in his life as a kid in a different country, dreaming of being on that level. Now he's here, and you could really see just the amazement he had himself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's looked to LeBron James for as long as he's known about basketball, basically. They've went head to head a lot, over the past few years, and now they're, arguably on the same level in the sense that they both were captains of the All-Star game. They were peers in that moment. They're some of the best players in the NBA. And Giannis is at the point where, as I wrote, like, he's a shoo-in for first-team All-NBA.
Yeah.
Like, where LeBron has been for years, or like a decade straight, where he probably won't be this year. And Giannis is an MVP favorite. He's having the best year of his career. His team is the best team in the NBA record-wise right now. And so obviously there's been a lot of changes, especially over the past few years that Giannis has been in the league, and he's closing the gap. Not that it'll ever be closed, but he's closing the gap on LeBron and proving that he can hang with some of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah, and Coach Budenholzer's line too about closing the gap, and that gap is getting closer now. As LeBron is, as he put it, still the same player, but it's getting closer because Giannis is now on that level, or getting to that level of LeBron, but certainly on that level of elite player.
Oh yeah, and like looking at LeBron's stats, like if you didn't look at them, you think, oh well, they're not as good. Like they can't be as good.
Yeah.
And you look at them, and they're just as good. Like he's averaging 27.5 points per game. That's what Giannis is doing. Like his assists are higher than Giannis. His rebounds are lower. He obviously can shoot the three a little bit better than Giannis. Has a lower field goal percentage because Giannis just dominates inside. But those numbers are still incredible numbers for somebody who's been doing it for as long as LeBron has. And so he hasn't fallen off. It's just that he had that injury that's affecting him tonight and has affected him for more than usual, more than we're used to. But the fact that Giannis is in that conversation, that's a credit to him. And that's the point that Mike Budenholzer was making, because LeBron hasn't gone down. Yeah. Like, he hasn't gone anywhere. And Giannis is the one who's come up. And Giannis was quick to mention, like, he's not LeBron. He's not close to LeBron. Like, that's, when I said, like, oh, do you think you could pass him? He was like, no. Like, that's how he started it, because he was like, no, like, that's not at all in the realm of possibility. But he's very aware of where he stands relative to LeBron, but also, hey, like, yes, he is closer. He's getting there.
Let's go back to Sunday's game against the Sixers. Were there more takeaways, or do you take more away from the Sixers end or the Bucks in their first game without Malcolm Brogdon?
I think the Bucks, they missed Brogdon for sure. I think they still could have won that game.
Yeah.
I think, the way Mirotic shot, I don't think that's how he's always going to shoot. I think the way that Chris Middleton started, or Eric Bledsoe started, I mean, basically the whole team outside of Giannis and DJ Wilson for the first three quarters wasn't bringing much offensively. And so those guys who weren't contributing, it's not like they didn't have opportunities. They had open looks. They had a lot of open looks, and that's why they took 53-point shots, just so they couldn't get them to go down.
I mean, is it too easy to say, and part of it is you can't really quantify this, but going in, that's a game the Sixers had circled, and that was a big game for the Sixers. But as you pointed out, they still had a chance to win it, and for everything we mentioned, for the way the Sixers played early, the way they shot early, what Jimmy Butler did, what Joel Embiid did, for the Bucks it was 52 points from Giannis and a starting 4 of the 5 starters that really struggled for most of the game, and they still lost by 5 and had a chance to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks, I don't know how much they had it circled, but I think they cared about that game too. Definitely Philly, really wanted to make a point, and I think the Bucks did too. Just talking to some of the guys, like, hey, we know it's a big game. We're gonna try and take stuff out of it. And Giannis mentioned multiple times in the past week, like, hey, we gotta get that Philly game. So it is important to them. But I think the Bucks played, like, for much of the game, reasonably good defense. Philly made a lot of tough shots. Those shots that Jimmy Butler was making in the fourth quarter weren't easy. Joel Embiid made it. Obviously that dagger 3 was pretty open. But outside of that, like, when he was going inside, he was getting contested. And you kind of just gotta tip your cap at that point. Philly made tough shots. The Bucks missed easy shots. And I for one would enjoy seeing those teams locked together in the playoffs, and that'd be a super fun series. I think they match up really well, and I'd love to see it.
Well, and I know Embiid took 13 3-pointers, but that dagger 3 you mentioned, you're still going to let him take that. 29% three-point shooter. That's the way this defense is constructed, to give up the threes. And Coach himself has said we'd certainly like the overall number of volume to come down, but give up the threes to those shooters like that are shooting in the 20s. and 30% opposed to guys like J.J. Redick.
Oh, absolutely. If you could have Joel Embiid shooting a three instead of J.J. Redick shooting a three, I think any coach, any team would take that. I think you can maybe close out a little bit better knowing that it's late in the shot clock and you might not have a lot of time to operate if he pump fakes. And that's something that, having not seen them since October, maybe they can work out the kinks a little bit for when they play in Philly on April 4th. Who knows if all the starters even play that game? It have the 1 seed locked up. I don't know if they will, but at that point, but do you play everybody? Do you show things? And it really all depends on where they are in the standings and if they can lock up that one spot.
We saw Nico get the start. I think a lot of us kind of wondered if that's what it would be, given the versatility, really, of all those guys in the starting five, but Middleton as well, that you can play him front court or back court. I know he didn't really answer the question, but Coach Budenholzer did say before the game on Sunday, I don't really like to go back and forth and change. So it seemed to indicate there's a good chance he's going to remain there. Is that what you would keep if you're Coach Mike Budenholzer and go with Nico and Middleton at the guard spot?
Yeah, I think that you could do that. I think it's reasonable, and you could bring Ersan Ilyasova as the first guy off the bench, replace Mirotic, and kind of bring a similar size guy out there. I don't think Mirotic is going to shoot as poorly as he did the other day. I think he's a much better offensive player than he showed against Philadelphia. So you'd expect him to bounce back. I think with Giannis Antetokounmpo out tonight, maybe you leave him there, even if you weren't planning on keeping him there long term, because then you can keep everybody else in their slots. Maybe you move up a Pat Connaughton or a Tony Snell into the starting lineup, and they can play the 2 guard, and Middleton can move down, and then you kind of have a normal balance of guys. I think Mirotic, he worked really well in that lineup in the second half against the Heat.
Yeah.
Playing with the starters and doing all of that. So I think that it's still a good lineup to test out and try and give it a few games. Budenholzer's been somebody who, maybe he's stubborn, maybe he's persistent, but he likes to stick with things and give them a chance to see what they really do. And so I think that he will probably do that again tonight, but, as he said, it's still in flux.
Well, and with Nico in the starting five, that does open up more minutes for DJ Wilson, who, I think we continue to bring this up, and it's just amazing. But DJ Wilson, what he's done for this team is basically, when he would get the questions about what can Christian Wood do to be a part of this rotation and get some chances here, everything we would point to is basically what DJ Wilson has done. And that's finding, as he puts it, finding ways to make an impact without scoring. The rebounding, the defense, the playmaking, especially of DJ Wilson. The fact that he continues to do this when going from in and out of the rotation, to me, is what's most impressive.
Oh, yeah, it's been super impressive because you never, a lot of NBA guys are creatures of habit. Yeah. They like to know what they're doing when they're subbing in, all that stuff. DJ can't make any habits. All he can do is in terms of like his rotation spot, all he can do is make habits of here's how I play when I'm out there and here's what I need to do. He really prizes the defensive end because he knows that's what Mike Budenholzer holds most dear in terms of what's going to get him on the court. He's obviously a really athletic, versatile guy who can go out there, defend multiple positions, knows what he's doing. Sometimes gives up some size defending against some fives, but he knows what he needs to do in terms of either taking them away by fronting them and doing his work early, or kind of just staying vertical and offering as much as a challenge, maybe trying to go for the strip, whatever. And then if he can add offense, like he did the other day, I mean, that's just a huge boost. I mean, then teams either have to respect him or he gets into a groove shooting wide open shots. And so, that's one of the biggest impediments to Christian Wood getting time when he was here was that, they would go to DJ Wilson first, and he usually didn't give him a reason to go any further.
Well, it's amazing to me, too, is that let's go back to last or 2 summers ago when DJ Wilson was drafted. I think consensus feeling was this was going to be a stretch 4, that's basically all he gave. Jason Kidd made the joke that we drafted him because he doesn't rebound and we don't rebound, that we thought just a shooter was going to struggle to defend and rebound, and those are the 2 areas he's making the biggest impact.
Yeah, he's worked really hard. I think last year, obviously, we didn't get to see a lot of him. He didn't play very much. He spent a lot of time in Oshkosh. But this summer, he worked really hard, spent a lot of time out in Vegas where his agent is and working out there. Got stronger, got more confident, got kind of the support from Mike Budenholzer and his coaching staff saying, hey, we value you. We think you can fit into what we do. And, he played well in Summer League. He didn't stand out in the way Christian Wood did, scoring and all that stuff, but he still played really well. Then he comes back and he You know, it was a very small sample size, but in that open scrimmage, he made a couple plays in the first, like, 2 minutes. Then he gets hurt, and he's gone for, like, 2 months. So, you know, it definitely took a lot of people by surprise, but I think by doing the little things, doing the dirty work, and you know, progressing in his own individual game, you know, has paid dividends for him and the Bucks.
Took a lot of people by surprise, but in hindsight, I guess it shouldn't have, because if you go back to September and October, and over the summer too, Coach Bud, Giannis especially, all of these guys would always bring up DJ Wilson, and Coach himself would say, you know, DJ, we can't wait to get him healthy. He's going to be a big part of what we're doing here. And I think a lot of us kind of scoffed at that and thought, okay, we'll wait and see. But he was telling us this all along, and now you're seeing it pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember back then in training camp, you know, people were wondering about DJ Wilson, like, oh, is he going to actually do anything this year?
Yeah.
And so I asked the questions. You know, I asked Bud, I asked Giannis, and all they could do was rave.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all they could do. And I was like, all right, well, that's the story. That's what they're saying. And people were like, oh, what are they raving about? There's no way, whatever. And then, lo and behold, you know, apparently the people who saw him play and do things actually knew what they're talking about.
Well, you know, it's interesting, too, because David Thorpe always makes the point about coaching and really how much a good coach can help things. And if you have a coach that isn't good with development, it basically wastes talent. And it's guys like DJ Wilson, because the point is always made that the LeBrons, the Giannis's, Kyrie Irvings, KDs, they're going to reach that level regardless. But you look at what happens when you get a system in place and all the work that's been done with DJ and the way that he has really flourished and developed as a player, that speaks to the coaching that's been around him.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say enough about Mike Budenholzer and his coaching staff and the way they've unlocked virtually everyone. I mean, you know, especially DJ Wilson, he definitely stands out among that group because we saw so little of him last year, and it wasn't all promising. To be able to come into this year and be somebody who all the fans are just basically saying, we need this guy all the time, free DJ, all that stuff. Like, that's unheard of last year. You know, but then you look at, you know, Malcolm Brogdon and what he's able to do and the trust that's put into him as part of this offense and just the open shots that are created for him. You know, you look at Eric Bledsoe just kind of playing free and easy. You know, it's like, oh, defense, like, you know, Bled, you do you. And we just trust that that's enough. And offensively, you know when to go, when to pass, all that type of stuff. I mean, you can go up and down the roster, and they're getting a lot out of this team.
We've reached the point now where 4 road games remaining. So I know this is the part of the season that coaches hate the most, where you just have to have your guys focused, get through the stretch drive here and get to the postseason. For a guy that travels around covering this team, though, you can see the end in sight, where you just have one more road trip, 4 games on the road before the postseason. Is the postseason easier or harder for booking the travel?
For booking the travel, it can be more difficult because you have less time to plan for it. I think it'll be nice for the first time covering the Bucks where they start at home. Yeah. So I don't need to immediately go from wherever I am to find a place for like 3 days later to get there. And nope, just stay home. Games 1 and 2 at Fiserv Forum. I'll enjoy that, and we can go to Orlando or Miami or Charlotte or whoever it is, you know, go there and have a little bit of, maybe a week, you know how flights are. They get more expensive the closer you get to it, and hotels and all that stuff. But then after that, I mean, we're going into possibly uncharted territory with the Bucks possibly going deep, or at least deeper than the first round for the first time in 18 years. So, you know, I'm strapping in, getting ready for the long haul, because you never know.
Worst travel experience you had this year?
Oh, the worst one this year? You know, I haven't had too many bad ones. I have had flights that have been delayed for a long time due to weather. I've gotten stuck sitting on the tarmac or getting de-iced. I did, actually, the worst one was in Toronto. I was the second time the Bucks played the Raptors.
One?
Yeah, the January one. And I was leaving the Scotiabank Arena. I was standing with a member of Toronto, of the Raptors PR, waiting for an Uber. And I get an alert saying that my flight has been canceled. I've been rebooked. And my flight the next morning was like super early in the morning. And I look at the email and I was like, oh, it says I'm rescheduled for the same time. Oh, wait, they rescheduled it for a full day later. I'm like, I can't stay here. Like, the Bucks are going to D.C. I need to get down there. Like, what's going on? So I had to, like, go and cancel that flight in the middle of the night and then get a new flight. And I was going to go to Baltimore because my brother lives there. It's close to D.C. I could work this out. It's fine. And then I get to the airport, and they said, oh, well, you're not going to make your connection to Baltimore, so you have to change your flight again. So I changed it, just said, fine, I'll go straight to D.C. I still have my hotel. whatever. And then I get to Detroit for my layover, and the DC flight is delayed, but the Baltimore flight is on time, and I can make it. So I go to the Baltimore one, I fly to Baltimore, cancel a DC hotel, stay the night with my brother and his wife and his kid, and then just take the train down the next day. So it all worked out. It was fine, but it was kind of a mess at the time.
Life on the road.
That's life on the road.
For everyone that says, boy, this would be great, it is.
Yeah, and
but there's that
and
stuff.
I book it all myself, you know,
Yeah.
and so I have to kind of handle all that. And people say, "Oh yeah, it's so fun to travel." I'm like, "Yes, it is. I will not say that it's not fun to travel. But when you travel, you also spend a lot of time in airports, and I think most people would agree spending time in airports is not fun.
It's fun to travel when you know I'm flying out on vacation tomorrow and I'm spending 2 days going to the airport tomorrow and flying back. Not when it's I have to fly here and then I have to connect here and then we have a game 2 days later and I have to do that. That's where it's not as fun.
Oh yeah, now on the West Coast, I went from Milwaukee to Denver to Sacramento to where was next? L.A.
yeah.
Went to L.A. Then I had to fly from L.A. to Oakland to Salt Lake City. Then from Salt Lake City to San Diego to Phoenix. It's like I couldn't get a straight flight anywhere. It's probably partially my fault. Trying to save the Journal Sentinel money. Please subscribe. We more subscribers would be great. You know, trying to be a good citizen, be a good company man. But you know, it's part of the job, comes with the territory, and I'm happy to do it.
You subscribe to, you can read the piece we were talking about before of Giannis closing the gap on LeBron. I mean, everything we touched on, the really national appeal he has now, his own shoe that's going to come out later this year. The national ads, you're starting to see him in, the captain of the All-Star game. And I know, I don't remember if it was you or someone else I was talking about this with, but just go back to the All-Star game and think of where this franchise was for the last 20 years, where you would get All-Stars, but think back to 2000, 2001, when it was, you had Ray Allen and Glenn Robinson, or Michael Redd getting in the game, and it was always, I hope our guys get in and can have a showing. To go from there to the captain of the team and the guy that's really on the biggest stage just speaks to everywhere this franchise has gone.
It's a brave new world.
Yes. Matt Velasquez of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, kind enough to join us again. Read the piece, subscribe to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, read the piece on Giannis closing the gap on LeBron. No Giannis or LeBron today, but the Bucks still playing the Lakers. 7 o'clock tip-off. 6:30 is when we get started on both Fox Sports Wisconsin and statewide on the Bucks Radio Network. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back once again Friday night with more Bucks Courtside Live.